Welcome to This Week in Crazy America. This week we have buried treasure in the Rocky Mountains, a one-handed INCEL, cops on the tail of subway lovebirds, and a bloody battle for Florida's python hunter. Now, before we get into the stories, folks, if you're new to the channel or if you're not subscribed yet, take a moment to press the subscribe button below and sign up for these weekly updates and roundups of the top stories, as well as for the videos that we put out throughout the week so that we can keep you up to date on all the stories that are coming out from Crazy America. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. And first up, we have the unfortunate Carini, an INCEL from West Virginia. Now, you're asking, what is an INCEL? Some of you know, but if you don't, it's a term that's been coined quite recently for those unfortunate young men, and it is all men, who have trouble satisfying the basic human urge to merge with a female human. We're guessing it's mostly with a female human where the problem lies. So Carini was one of these poor chaps who, for want of a better expression, can't get his end away. And things went seriously downhill for him this week, though, because this deranged INCEL created a homemade bomb to attack the hot chicks that he thought were denying him, rejecting him, denying his urge to get his end away. And the homemade bomb he made literally blew up in his face. It blew his hand off, and the hapless Carini was tried to get some treatment for these injuries, went to a hospital, missing a hand. It's pretty gruesome. He was missing a hand, a whole hand, and then on his other hand, several fingers were blown off. And then he had shrapnel wounds around his neck and all over his face. You can see in the photo, pretty grim stuff. And the hospital reported his injuries. He claimed it was a lawnmower accident, and the hospital saw through that pretty quickly. And the police arrested him and found out various social media posts, and it was a bomb plot to blow up hot girls. So a terrible guy, and he's not only going to be facing a lot of time in the can, he's also limited his own options for some self-satisfaction. But I don't think anyone will be feeling sorry for him on that account. So on to the next story. So while Carini suffers from now an inability to satisfy those basic human needs, either with his own hands or otherwise, other people have been indulging themselves in that area a little too publicly. So the NYPD, the New York police, which has had its hands full in the last couple of weeks battling looters and managing some peaceful protests, has returned this week to the case of a couple that were caught on video in a lewd act. It's pretty shocking, really, even by the standards of what's happened during the pandemic. Of course, the subway was largely deserted, so this couple were caught, as you can see, at a subway station in Brooklyn, not really worrying who may see them, or in their case, who may film them. So they were caught on film doing this back in mid-May. But New York's finest, who've been a little preoccupied as we've seen, just announced this week that they're stepping up the efforts to catch these folks. They don't want to let them get away with it, so they've released an image through their Crime Stopper channel, which shows the couple, how can we put it, in flagrante, in the middle of the act. And the NYPD want to track them down. So we'll see how that search goes, and we'll stay on top of it, so to speak. Now, for a very different kind of story. When it comes to treasure hunting, X usually marks the spot, or so it did in this case. A 10-year treasure hunt that was taking place in the Rocky Mountains in New Mexico is finally over. This week, one plucky adventurer found nearly $2 million worth of loot that had been hidden in the mountains in a very remote spot. Now, this was a very interesting story because the challenge was set up by an eccentric octogenarian art dealer. It was set up by this guy called Forrest Fenn. And Fenn buried this chest of treasure of gold and jewels and other artifacts in the Rocky Mountains 10 years ago, back in 2010. And he did it at the time because he wanted to give people hope. It was just a little while after the last big recession, obviously the financial crash of 2008. And so Fenn wanted to give people an incentive to get into the outdoors, to really have an adventure. And it's a pretty incredible story because hundreds of thousands of people tried to find this treasure. They set off into the mountains and they had some clues which Fenn had left. A lot of them were in a book he wrote and a poem that he wrote to leave the clues. And this was an epic adventure for many. And of course, everyone failed up until this week. And at least 5 people died trying to find the treasure. Now, the lucky treasure hunter, the guy that finally did find all the loot, he's not been named yet, but he can now sit back, relax, and enjoy his $2 million bounty. Good job, sir. So moving on. Now, road rage, we all know, it can affect all of us from time to time, right? We've all been there. We've honked the horn or even gesticulated wildly at some minor annoyance. We've done things we're not proud of. We'd never do them if we were walking down the street. But there's something about getting behind the wheel. It seems to make that red mist fall over us far more easily. Well, there's a case this week that's in a completely different category to what most of us would do. The case of a guy called Kevin Brownlee. And another motorist pointed out that Brownlee's reckless driving was a danger to everyone on the road. And how did Brownlee react? Well, sadly, not that surprisingly. So this thug, Brownlee, punched the man, tried to run him over, then chased him somewhere else, and eventually shot him. Yeah, you heard right, folks. The road rage reckless driver shot the man that pointed out his bad behaviour. Now, thank God, the victim of this is expected to survive, but Brownlee faces an attempted murder rap, and he could be going away for a very long time, so at least the roads around where he lives may be a little bit safer, at least for now. Now, another story, actually, which also involved driving, slightly different. Fortunately, it was not quite as violent as the case of the nutter Kevin Brownlee, but it was in some ways equally as disturbing. And so this story involved a creepy middle-aged man. And this man down in Florida is now facing felony charges because he allowed a 12-year-old girl who was unrelated to him to jump into his car and drive the car and speed at up to 85 miles per hour, putting everyone in danger on the highway. So the cops pulled the car over. Fortunately, no one was injured, but they interviewed the man, the 41-year-old, Shaun Michaelsen, and he said he just wanted to be like a cool dad, even though the girl was not related to him. He claimed it was the daughter of a friend who was staying with him. So a bit of a creepy guy, and he's been now charged with child neglect and allowing an unauthorized person to drive. So hopefully the roads around him will be a little bit safer now too. So finally this week, for something also completely different, we stay down in Florida and we go back to someone we've covered before, the Florida python hunter, very famous guy in his community, Mike Kimmey. Well, Kimmey, he's won a lot of competitions over the years. Well, this week he had the fight of his life trying to subdue his latest quarry, his latest python quarry. So Kimmey is known across the Sunshine State and beyond, probably across the country, as very handy, to put it mildly, when it comes to hunting pythons. He's very good at taming the troublesome pests. But this week, he almost bit off more than he could chew. So Kimmel spotted a supersized serpent who wasn't quite ready to go gently into that good night. So this reptile that Kimmel found this week was a whopping 17-foot long python and weighed roughly 150 pounds. And so the beast gave Kimmel the fight of his life. And after quite a struggle, the hunter did get the reptile under control, but only just. And as you can see, he's got the wounds to prove it. Well done, sir. You got there in the end. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Stay safe and stay healthy. And before we go, do remember to click the subscribe button below and sign up for these weekly updates and all the other videos that we post. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Bye for now.
Will we